The drive to Lakewood took 40 minutes, and Marcus Cole spent every single one of them talking himself out of turning around. He had made the U-turn in his head at least 6 times before he even hit the highway. Once when he passed the gas station where he used to buy scratch tickets with his first paycheck from the grocery store. Once when he crossed the old bridge over Miller Creek and the rusted green railings caught in his headlights like something out of a dream he kept having but could never fully remember. And again, each mile pulling something tighter in his chest, some old familiar knot that Lakewood had tied in him a long time ago and never fully loosened. His therapist had told him this trip would be good for him. Closure, she said, in that calm, unhurried voice she used when she was about to suggest something he didn't want to do. Going back gives you the chance to see how far you've come. He had nodded at the time, the way you nod when someone says something that sounds true but lands hollow. What he had not told her, what he had not told anyone, was that he was not coming back as the success story. He was not rolling in with the wins. He was coming back as a man whose company was 3 weeks from the kind of collapse that ends careers. A man whose board had scheduled an emergency meeting for Monday morning that every single person in that room already knew the outcome of. He was coming back with a maxed-out card, a car with 200,000 miles on it, and a particular weight behind his eyes that comes from carrying something alone for too long. He was coming back as exactly what Derek Shaw had always said he would be. That thought stayed with him the whole drive. It sat in the passenger seat like a person. The parking lot of Lakewood High was nearly full when he arrived, and for a moment Marcus just sat in the car with the engine running, watching people move toward the entrance in their good clothes, laughing and grabbing each other's arms and doing the performance that reunions demand. He recognized shapes and walks before he recognized faces. That was the strange thing about people you grew up with. The body remembers them before the mind catches up. He turned the engine off, checked his phone. The notification was still there, the one he'd been sliding past for 3 days. Cole Tech Board, emergency session, Monday, 9 a.m. He looked at it for a long moment, the screen light cutting through the dark of the car. And then he placed the phone face down on the seat beside him like he was laying something to rest. He got out, straightened his jacket, took one breath that was longer than the others, and walked through the front entrance of the school he swore at 18 he would never set foot in again. The gymnasium had been transformed in the way gymnasiums always get transformed for these things. Balloons, string lights, round tables with centerpieces, a DJ in the corner working through a playlist of songs that all felt like they belonged to someone else's younger years now. The old bleachers had been folded back, and the floor was full of people, 40 of them maybe, drifting in clusters and leaning into conversations with the exaggerated ease of adults pretending they were never insecure teenagers in this very room. Marcus took a name tag from the table at the entrance and pressed it onto his lapel. He had just turned to face the room when Diane appeared at his elbow. Rhinestone committee sash, clipboard, the exact same unstoppable warmth she'd had at 17. Like certain people just come into the world running and never stop. "Marcus Cole!" She grabbed his arm and held it the way old friends do. "I had you on the maybe list. I'm so glad you made it." "Almost didn't," he said. She laughed. "You always said things like that. Even in high school, like you were always about to leave." She pulled him slightly closer and dropped her voice. "Okay, I have to tell you something before you walk in there cold. Something is different tonight. 2 somethings, actually." He raised an eyebrow. She noted toward the far side of the room. "Look near the bleachers." He looked. She was standing alone near the far wall, holding a glass of water with the stillness of someone who had paid a very high price to be comfortable in their own skin, and was now wearing that comfort like it was the most natural thing in the world. She was tall, poised, wearing a deep burgundy dress that she owned completely. Her name tag read Jordan, and underneath the name, in careful handwriting, were two small words, formerly Jamie. Marcus went quiet inside. He remembered Jamie, quiet, watchful, always at the edges of things, the kind of person who seemed to be waiting for the world to decide whether there was room for them. Disappeared junior year, transferred, people said, though the actual story was never clear, and nobody pressed very hard to find it. And now here was Jordan, standing in the same gymnasium that once barely knew what to do with her, except she wasn't at the edge of anything. She was right in the middle of the room, standing like she owned the floor beneath her, which Marcus had a feeling was something that had been a long time coming. "Wow," he said softly.
"I know," Diane said. "She reached out to me 2 months ago asking if she could come. I told her this was her reunion as much as anyone's." Diane's voice had a quiet fierceness in it. She was nervous. I told her, "Don't be." Marcus looked at Jordan a moment longer, something moving through him that felt like admiration and something older than admiration. "You said 2 things," he said. Diane's expression shifted slightly. "Derek's here." The name dropped into him like a stone into still water, and he felt the rings of it move all the way to the edges. Where? He found him outside. The side door of the gymnasium opened onto a short concrete walkway that led down to the old athletic track, and Derek Shaw was sitting on the bottom step with his forearms resting on his knees and a cane leaning against the railing beside him. He was staring out at the dark football field with the fixed, faraway look of a man who had been sitting with his own thoughts for a while and had come to some kind of arrangement with them. He looked nothing like Marcus remembered. The Derek Shaw of memory had been a physical force, big, loud, magnetic in the way that certain people in high school are magnetic not because of anything good in them, but because of the particular hunger they put out, the need to be at the center of everything, to control every room just by walking into it. He had moved through Lakewood High like a storm system, and everyone either moved with him or got out of the way, and the few people who did neither, the ones who stood their ground or simply didn't notice the weather, those were the ones he focused on. Those were the ones he couldn't stand. Marcus had been one of those people. This man on the steps was quieter in every direction. The breadth was still there in his shoulders, but it had softened. His hair was cut close and there was gray at the temples. The cane against the railing was not an affectation. He held himself with the careful deliberateness of someone who had learned to think about movement in a way most people never have to. He heard the door and turned, and when he saw Marcus, his whole body went still. For a long moment, neither of them said a word. The night air moved between them, cool and carrying the faint smell of cut grass from the field, and somewhere behind the door, the muffled bass of the DJ's music pushed through the wall like a slow pulse. Derek broke first. "I was hoping you'd come," he said. His voice was different, too. The performance was gone. Whatever used to fill it up, the ease, the command, the careless certainty, had been replaced by something that had no name except honesty. "Why?" Marcus asked. He wasn't hostile. He was just being precise. Derek looked at him for a moment. Then he shifted on the step and said, "Come sit down, please." Marcus looked at him a beat longer. Then he walked down and sat on the bottom step, leaving a careful distance between them, and they both faced the dark field together. Derek was quiet for a moment before he started, like he was choosing the first stone carefully before stepping into water he wasn't sure of the depth of. "2 years ago, I had a stroke," he said. Marcus turned to look at him. "I was in a conference room, 36 years old, $300,000 salary, screaming about quarterly numbers at a group of analysts who were scared to look me in the eye." He paused. "And then something just stopped. Inside my head, something stopped. And the next thing I knew, I was in a hospital room,
and I couldn't move the left side of my body, and the doctor was standing at the foot of my bed telling me that I was lucky to be alive. Marcus said nothing. He listened the way he had trained himself to listen over years of building a company, completely, without filling the silence. 6 weeks in that hospital, Derek continued. 6 weeks lying in that bed with a television I couldn't focus on and a phone I could barely hold and nothing to do except think about my life, about what it added up to, about who I was when nobody was watching and nobody needed anything from me. He ran his thumb along the handle of the cane, and I kept landing on the same things over and over, like a plane that couldn't find the runway, the same faces, the same moments. He turned and looked at Marcus directly. "You were first," he said. "You were always first." Marcus held his gaze. "That hallway," Derek said, "that project you were carrying, I can still see it, you coming around the corner with that thing in your hands, and the look on your face, man. You were lit up. You were genuinely lit up about something you had built, and it was unlike anything I'd ever seen from anyone in this school, and I—" He stopped. His jaw tightened. "I took it out of your hands and I made everyone laugh at it, and then I dropped it. And I watched you get on the floor and pick up the pieces, and I walked away." The football field was very dark and very quiet. "I had a daughter," Derek said, and his voice changed completely when he said it, dropped into something softer and deeper. "Her name is Reese. She's 15 now, and 2 years ago, right around the time I was getting out of rehab for the stroke, she came to me." He stopped, swallowed once. "She sat me down at the kitchen table and she looked at me with the most terrified eyes I have ever seen on another human being in my life, and she told me that she was transgender." The words sat in the night air between them. "She shook," Derek said. "She sat right across from me and she physically shook, waiting to see what her father was going to do, whether he was going to be the kind of man she needed or the kind of man he used to be." His voice was steady, but it was costing him something to keep it that way. "And I looked at my daughter shaking in front of me, terrified of the person who was supposed to love her without conditions, and something happened in me that I don't have a good word for. Something cracked open that had been sealed for a very long time." Marcus was very still. "Because I knew that feeling," Derek said. "I knew what it felt like to be in front of someone and shake. Not because of anything I'd been through. I never had the courage to be afraid of anything real. But I'd made other people feel it. I had spent years of my life making other people shake, and I had told myself it was just how things were. It was just high school. It was just words." He shook his head slowly. "It wasn't just words. It was never just words." He reached into his jacket then and drew out a white envelope, thick and sealed, and he held it out toward Marcus. Marcus looked at it but didn't take it. "What is that?" 14 investors. People I have spent 2 years building relationships with since I got out of that hospital. Real people, serious people, the kind who build things with founders rather than stripping them for parts. I didn't do it for any other reason than this moment right here." He kept his arm extended, envelope in hand, steady. "They've read your patents, Marcus. Every one of them. They've had their people go through your platform architecture, and every single one of those conversations ended the same way, with the question of why Coltech hasn't been properly funded." His eyes didn't move from Marcus's face. "They want a meeting Monday morning, before your board session." Marcus looked at the envelope for a long time without speaking. "How do you know about the board meeting?" he finally said. "Because I've been watching Coltech for 2 years, Derek said simply. "I'm not where I was before the stroke. The firm I'm with now is smaller, quieter, but I'm still in rooms where information moves, and your name comes up more than you know, and almost always with the same sentence attached to it. Brilliant architecture, broken funding chain." He paused. "I know what's going to happen Monday if you walk in there without options. I know what they're going to tell you." Marcus exhaled slowly through his nose. He looked out at the field. "Why?" he said. Not angrily, not bitterly. He said it the way you ask a question when the answer genuinely matters to you. Derek answered without hesitation. "Because. The morning after Reese told me who she was, I woke up and the first thing I thought about was you. About that gear on the floor. About the look on your face." He lowered his arm and set the envelope on the step between them. "I can't undo what I did. I know that. I'm not standing here trying to buy my way back into being a decent person. But I can make sure that the thing I tried to stop doesn't get stopped by anything else either. Not by a board, not by bad luck, not by anything I can reach." He looked at the envelope on the step. "Take it, Marcus. Take the meeting. Let someone who owes you a long time of belief actually deliver it." Marcus stared at the envelope for a long moment. Then he said something Derek wasn't expecting. "I still have the gear." Derek looked up.
"The one that broke off the arm when you dropped it. It skidded across the floor, and I picked it up and I put it in my jacket pocket that day, and I've had it in a box ever since." Marcus looked at him. "I moved 14 times, 4 cities, 12 years of building a company out of whatever I had available, sleeping on air mattresses in office spaces, eating badly, working till 2, 3 in the morning, more times than I can count, and every single time I packed a box and moved, I found that gear and I put it in the new box." He paused. "I never threw it out." Derek stared at him. The question was on his face before he asked it. "Why?" he said. "Because it was the truest thing I owned," Marcus said quietly. "Everything else I told myself could have been a story, could have been ego or stubbornness or something I invented to keep going. But that gear was real. It was a real thing that got broken by someone who wanted me to stop, and I picked it up and I kept it." He looked at Derek steadily. "It meant that broken things aren't finished things. It meant that what got knocked out of my hands was still mine." Derek looked away, out at the dark field. His jaw moved. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that the sounds of the party inside the gym filled the space. Laughter, a cheer, the DJ dropping a beat. When Derek looked back, his eyes were glassy, but his voice was controlled. "I'm sorry, Marcus," he said, "for all of it, for every version of it." Marcus picked up the envelope. He held it in both hands, feeling its weight. "How is she?" he said. "Reese." And the transformation in Derek's face was something to see. All the weight of the conversation lifted for just a moment, replaced by something pure and uncomplicated. "She's extraordinary," he said, and the word came out full. "She's the bravest human being I've ever been around in my entire life. Braver than me, braver than anyone I've ever worked with, braver than anyone I grew up with." He shook his head slowly, still smiling. "She's teaching me things. At 15, she's teaching her father things about what it means to actually live without the armor on. She sounds like someone who was always that person, just waiting for the room to be safe enough to show it." Derek nodded. "Yeah." He looked at Marcus. "Yeah, that's exactly right." Marcus went back inside after a while. He moved through the reunion differently now. Not lighter exactly, but differently weighted, like something had been redistributed in him. He found himself at the edge of the room near Jordan, and when she noticed him, she tilted her head with a small, composed smile. "Marcus," she said. "Jordan." He held her name carefully,
making sure she heard that he meant it. "You look like someone who walked through fire and came out choosing exactly this." She considered him for a moment, and then she laughed, a full, generous laugh with nothing held back. That might be the most accurate thing anyone said to me in years. They stood together looking at the room, the same gymnasium, the same floor that had hosted every high school thing a floor can host. Both of them were here, which was its own kind of statement. "I heard you went through something," she said, nodding toward the envelope in his hand. "I did." "Derek?" "Yeah." She was quiet for a moment. "I had a conversation with him earlier tonight," she said. "He came and found me when I arrived. He knew who I was. He didn't stumble over it. He didn't make it strange. He just—" She stopped, and there was something in her voice that required a moment to settle. "He apologized. He said he'd been one of the people who made this place unsafe for me. He said he had a daughter who had taught him what that cost." Marcus nodded slowly. "I wasn't ready to hear it," she said. "And then I was. And it didn't fix what happened back then. Nothing fixes that. It just becomes part of you and you carry it forward." She looked at the envelope in his hand. "But it was real. Whatever he gave you, it's real." "I think it might save my company," said Marcus. She tilted her glass toward him gently. "Then go make sure it does." He left just before 10, walked through the front entrance, out past the banner, into the cool of the parking lot. He stopped once and turned back and looked at the school, really looked at it, the way you look at something when you're saying a real goodbye rather than a polite one. The windows of the gymnasium glowed warm, and through them he could see the silhouettes of people moving, living their lives, carrying their own private weights around the same old floor. Lakewood High. The building that had given him everything, and almost taken everything, sometimes in the same afternoon. He reached into his pocket with his free hand and found the gear. He carried it always. It lived in whatever jacket he was wearing, a habit so old it had stopped being a choice. He held it between his fingers for a moment, in the parking lot dark, this small, worn thing he had refused to let go of for 20 years. Then he put it back in his pocket. He opened the envelope and looked at the names by the light of his phone. 14 of them. People Derek Shaw had spent 2 years of a changed life carefully assembling into a lifeline for someone he had wronged before either of them knew what anything cost. Marcus stood there for a moment, looking at the names and feeling the full weight of the night, the conversation on the steps, the gear in his pocket, Jordan standing tall in that room, the Monday morning meeting, all of it. And then he pressed call before doubt could find the gap. The line rang twice. "Hey," he said when it picked up. "It's Cole. I know what time it is, and I'm sorry, but I need you to clear Monday morning before the board session." He paused, looking up at the dark sky. "Because I just found something that changes everything, and I'll explain all of it when I see you, but right now I need you to trust me the way you trusted me when none of this existed yet." He listened. Then he smiled, the real kind. "I'll see you in the morning," he said. He got in the car. The engine turned over strong and certain. He backed out of his spot, swung toward the exit, and drove out of the Lakewood High parking lot for what felt like, finally, truly the last time he would ever have to leave it behind. The road opened up ahead of him, and he drove into it. The radio came on by itself when he hit the highway, some old song that had no reason to mean anything, and somehow it meant everything tonight. He drove with the window cracked and the cool air moving through, and the envelope on the passenger seat, and the gear in his pocket, and the particular feeling of a man who came into a night expecting nothing and discovered that the person he least expected had been the one holding the door open. He drove, and the lights of the town fell away behind him, and the highway stretched ahead, clean and open and full of Monday.